Hi, this is Alan Shimel, DevOps.com, here at DevOps Enterprise Summit 2016, London. And I'm happy to be joined by Margo Cronin, who actually just
Hi, Alan.
came off the stage.
Yes.
And Margo is with Entarchs, think of enterprise architects.
Exactly.
And they are working with Zurich Insurance
Mm-hmm.
in their DevOps transformation. And Margo spoke a little bit about how do we get, respect the monolith, I think was the name
of my session, yeah.
Yes, and it's about respecting these large organizations and
Exactly.
how do they work. Margo, why don't you tell our audience?
I mean, I'm just off the stage, and it was such a rush. It was really great fun. I'm just so flattered to be here. And I followed Barclays and the revenue commissioners. They were really good use cases to follow. And I spoke about the building of the Zurich Global Web Platform, where we started off using Scrum. And to do Scrum correctly, to support the business, we actually found that we had to do DevOps. And we found as a team that there was an incredible amount of information about technology and about tools out there. And even a lot of information about culture and KPIs, for example, but not so much information about how large, distributed, regulated organizations can adopt DevOps and the challenges that they face. And the challenges we faced were very specific to the nature of our organization as opposed to the technology. Mm-hmm. If we had a problem with technology, there were so many great sources we could go to for information.
Yeah.
From the product vendors to the community to experiences people had. But a lot of the problems we faced were, let's say, working with our supplier or working with the current governance models that we had that supported projects versus product, for example. And then also, in organizations like Zurich Insurance, we're about protection. We're about identifying and mitigating our customers' risk. And so there are many departments that we have to work with, and we have to make them feel safe. You're doing something new. You've got people touching production.
Right.
They're protecting our customers. They're not the bad guys, people like group information security and operations. And so I just spoke about how not to underestimate and to work with these monoliths to enable the correct behavior change in the organization.
You know what, Margo, I have a long career in IT behind me, and I think you hit on something here that, when we talk about organizations like a Zurich or any large, especially financial organization, they depend on a best practices approach to just about everything they do, including Scrum. I mean, Scrum caught on in large organizations when you had these sort of Scrum best practices, you had Scrum certifications, etc. The book is still being written. I always say that we're seeing emerging practices right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've quite reached best practices, right? It's emerging. And so it sounds like that's what you're doing. There was no book for you to go to here. You
exactly
kind of had to make it up as we go.
Exactly. For us, what for me was very fascinating was the transition from a project world to a product world.
Yeah.
It was interesting because really what we started off trying to do was Scrum correctly. We said we weren't going to do Kanban, we weren't going to pick and choose. My joke was, it's like yoga, that the theory is really easy, but the discipline is really tough.
Yeah.
And that we're like the giraffe with the head in the sand, and the legs everywhere, trying to start off with Scrum. And to become better at Scrum, we naturally fell into DevOps to enable us to reduce our cycle time so we could meet our definition of done at the end of the sprint. That was how we fell into DevOps. But then, to have DevOps adopted through our organization, I realized that the organization, Zurich Insurance, and many large organizations out there are very pivoted around project.
Yes.
And our best practices are pivoted around project and pivoted around, our governance is pivoted around project. So how do you support the evolvement of a product when everything is around project? And that's exactly right, Alan, that the best practices and the tools and the processes are currently just being written for that organizations.
They're emerging. But I do think, as a result of things like the DevOps Enterprise Summit, and I'm pointing to the logo, as if people can see, but, this is where these emerging practices, I think, get socialized among people like yourself.
Yeah.
And hopefully we will see not a codification, but we will see these emerging practices kind of standardize into best practices.
Yeah, and things like lessons learned. You know, one of the things like I spoke about was in our industry right now, we talk a lot about mean time between failure and moving to mean time to recover. But for example, in my organization, we penalize our suppliers when there are incidents in production. So even if you have a fully autonomous DevOps team that will resolve your issues for you, some poor guy is still being fined.
Right. It's not
You're
blameless,
never going to move from mean time between failure to mean time to recover when you've got this model in place.
Yeah.
And so, you know, for me, like a big lesson learned there is before you put developers in situ, before you invest in tooling, to actually look at like the contracts that dictate and govern your production servers and your pre-production servers. Because if you have some poor dude and he's being, you know, punched every time this is severity.
That's not a blameless postmortem.
Exactly,
right now.
You know, and so it was really great learning. And right now I'm really interested in this idea of our organization slowly adopting DevOps and how we need to evolve and integrate those DevOps products to those monolithic applications. The two-speed IT problem. I know with the organizations I work with, a lot of them have monolithic applications that work, you know? For example, like a payroll system. It pays the employees, it does what it says in the tin. Margo, leave it alone. That's kind of what I get. We're not converting it to DevOps, we're not converting it to Scrum. How do you integrate that successfully with the DevOps product? And so then you have the two-speed IT problem. And this is currently what I'm looking at with Zurich Insurance and looking at if automation is the answer here. If we need to automate certain aspects.
First of all, that particular problem is right out of the Phoenix Project book, right?
Yes.
The payroll thing
Exactly,
broke, the payroll system broke. But secondly, I would point you, there's a lady here who I'll be interviewing later, Rosalind Radcliffe from IBM.
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever met Rosalind.
Yes, I have, yeah.
She's who you want to talk to about that particular issue, because what you'll find is even with the payroll system, as we move to a DevOps culture and we start moving faster, you're bringing people on, you're bringing in project people who may not be, you know, long-term employees. The things are just happening so quick that payroll system has to be able to move at the speed of business as well.
Yes.
So it may run on a mainframe, it may run external, it may be working fine the way it is. But when we talk about multi-speed, bimodal IT, two-speed IT, whatever you want to call it, they still need to run somewhat in sync.
Exactly.
I always tell people, to me, it's more like a Swiss watch. You have big gears, you have little gears. Some spin very fast, some spin very slow.
Exactly.
But overall, we have a fine timepiece.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's a very good analogy, because just like in a Swiss watch, you're going to leave some of those systems alone.
Right.
You're going to leave some of those systems more in their waterfall nature, because the business have a roadmap. They're happy with their release once every 2 years, but yet it's part of our ecosystem. It's part of our production landscape. So we need to find that correct sync to enable everything to tick along like a smooth Swiss watch.
Exactly. Margo, we've probably gone way over our time. I apologize.
Awesome.
But
it's been fun.
thank you very much and thank you for speaking at DevOps Enterprise Summit.
Thank you for having me.
I think people love to hear these stories. And we still have a day and a half left, so enjoy the rest of it.
Yes, I get to enjoy the conference now.
Okay. Margo Combs, DevArc, working with Zurich. This is Alan Shimel for DevOps.com.